next paper is by, next talk is by Dr. Karanam Aravinda Garu. He is the retired DGP and trustee of INDICA. This introduction here is very simple and humble. Dr. Karanam Aravinda Garu is a retired Director General of Police of the erstwhile United Andhra Pradesh, when Andhra Pradesh was not divided, who studied Sanskrit under Mahamahopadhyaya Padma Shri Dr. Sri Pullali Sri Ramachandra Garu, and studied Vedanta under Mahamahopadhyaya Swami Tattvavidananda Saraswati. This is actually very brief, but he is much more than that. On the INDICA Moksha Advaita Academy platform, he has given talks on several different topics like Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, and he has covered many topics of scriptures and epics on the INDICA Academy platform and many other platforms also. With all his deep knowledge in scriptures, he is going to present his talk on Varna. What do the scriptures say about it? Over to you, Aravinda.
Thank you, Srinivas Garu, and good morning, everyone. It is a very brilliant and very interesting presentation by Sri Udumudi Srinivas. I agree with him on several points. Maybe some slight difference may be there, but on several issues, most of the issues, I do agree. And I don't claim to have studied all the Vedic literature because it's very, very difficult. Unless we know Sanskrit, unless we know old Vedic Sanskrit, it is very difficult. I have done a PhD in Sanskrit, and I have also done studied some Upanishads. So that is my background. So I will start with, because the time is, at least I'm 18 minutes behind there. So I may take 10-15 minutes more. I'll try to finish as quickly as possible. And if I am going beyond time, kindly remind me so that I can stop. So because there is not much time, I will first of all tell what are the important points which I want to make. The first point is we can't skirt around the issue because it has become such a very important issue now, which is going to define the very security of our country, the integrity of our country, and the integrity of the religion itself. So we cannot skirt around the issue, and keeping quiet would merely aggravate the problem. So that is what I think. And to the best of my knowledge, our texts have not created a hierarchy of castes. To the best of my knowledge, a hierarchy of castes. They have talked about the Varna, as Mr. Srinivas just now said. They have talked about the Varnas, but not about the castes. He was talking about independent Jatis which came up, and then there was no great Jati hierarchy. Then Varna, as we know, it is based on the innate nature of a person. That is Sattva-guna, Rajoguna, Tamoguna. That is the predominance of a particular guna determined the Varna of a particular person. And as Srinivas has pointed out, in the beginning, there was not much of, division, in the sense that one person, if he had 4 sons, one person could be a Brahmin, another could be a Kshatriya, another could be a Vaishya, and so on. And there were intermarriages, particularly among the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas. And our books do not talk about much of Brahmana versus Shudra, etc. Very rarely there are certain cases, but many Puranas and then many of the secondary texts like Itihasas and Puranas, they talk about the intermarriage between the two Varnas, that is Brahmana and Kshatriya. Then next point is, another thing is, it is not by birth. Varna is not by birth. That is another important point which we have to see. And we have to acknowledge the anguish among the people, anguish among the educated people, particularly among the SCs, etc., and SCs who particularly ask for spiritual equality. They say we are not bothered about the social equality or anything. We are bothered about the spiritual equality. Then, while addressing these issues, it is very naive to think, of course, this is beyond my subject. It is very naive to think that Hindus can be united by festivals like Hanuman Jayanti or Ganesh procession, etc. Unless we handle this issue, unless we clarify what our texts say. Here, of course, we can pose two questions to one question to the traditionalists and one question to the reformists also. The questions to the traditionalists is: are you interested in preserving a particular text, and are you interested in preserving certain ritualistic aspect of religion, or are you interested in the whole society? Are you interested in the whole society, in the whole religion as such? That is one question to the traditionalists. The question to reformists is: in our anger and in our anxiety and in our anguish, we should not condemn the Hindu thought as such, the Hindu thought as a whole. We should not dismiss it, and it's like throwing the baby with the bathwater. And it would be a very great tragedy if the great philosophy is discarded and people are allowed to go to some faith-based religions. So that is another point which we have to see. And in this context, we can take Vivekananda as the greatest example of how ritualism, etc., or the Varna system can be not even religion, ritualism. Ritual is also there in the Vivekananda school, but the Varna system can be totally dissociated from the Hindu thought. He is the greatest example. And that is what his all other people, all other followers are doing now, whether it is Ramakrishna mission or Chinmaya mission or many other missions, modern missions, all the modern Swamis. Then a few more points are that the Varna is different from Kulam. I'm going to explain it. Then caste is not created by the Smritis. Manu merely used those castes to put people who are born from the inter-Varna marriages. That also I will just briefly explain. And another point is our scriptures, they provide for amendments. It is not as though all our Smritis are inflexible. In fact, the Upanishads themselves say whenever there is a need, depending on the time, depending on the place, Athayadite, Dharma Vichikitsava, Vrutta Vichikitsava, Syat, it says our Taitiri Upanishad says, depending on the time, place, and the situation, Dharma Shastras can change. So, after so many thousands of years, it is necessary that we have to change our Dharma Shastras, and we need not stick on to that Manusmriti only as the identifying factor for all the Hindus, and we need not flog ourselves. So, that is what I feel. And another point is, in the initial days, Brahmins were created out of other castes. That also is we find in several books and Puranas, particularly books like Brahmanotpatti Martanda or Chaturvarnya Bharata Samiksha, which are both in Sanskrit and written by very eminent Swamijis. So they talk about how people like Parashurama, how people like Rama, and many other later kings also created certain brahmanas whenever there was a need for some people. In fact, brahmana is somewhat like a pastor or a maulana. So religion requires some people who dedicate themselves for that and then who propagate. So they created not many people. And in the later days, we also see that many dvijas, they became shudras. Several dvijas, they became shudras because of the invaders. And if we read books like The Valley of Kashmir by a British ICS officer, he is that Walter Roper Lawrence, W.P. Lawrence. If we read The Valley of Kashmir, it gives such a horrifying picture of about how thousands and thousands of people who were wearing jennus were killed, and then mounds and mounds of jennus were burnt. So, a British writer, an ICS officer at that time, if it were to be written by somebody, some Indian, it would be very greatly discounted. But it is written by an ICS officer, and that book is still very much available. And another point is, we have to take any decision, or rather, our leaders, our religious leaders. There is a great burden on our religious leaders to clarify these points. It is not as though I discuss with some Udumudi Srinivas, I may agree with him on some points, he may agree with me on some point. It's not like that. In fact, this issue has been right from the time of Mahabharata. Even in the Mahabharata times, there is a debate on who is a Brahmana and who is a real Brahmana. So the same thing is we see in Buddha also. What Buddha has in what we saw just now, it is exactly the same thing which we find in the Mahabharata. And that is the reason why people debate, no, Mahabharata came later or Buddhism came later. We did not go into all that. But the debate has been there all through society. And there is a burden on our religious leaders to clarify the issue, to clarify and say that Varna is something which is totally different and Jati is not something which is created by the religion. Then that is basically we have to keep these civilizational wars in mind. Otherwise, we are going to all of us are going to go down the drain. Then another point is the concept of dvija. The concept of dvija, in my view, it has to be revived. And what is a Dvija? As Srinivas pointed out just now, Dvijas are the Brahmana, Kshatriya, and Vaishya. And Vaishya, Brahmana, we have some clarity about who is a Brahmana. We also have some clarity about who is a Kshatriya. In among the Kshatriyas, there are certain sub castes or jatis, and among the Shudras, we have got several. That is the reason why, as Srinivas was pointing out, though there are only four Varnas, there are hundreds and thousands of castes. And who are these Shudras? Vaishyas. Vaishya is Krushi, Gavrakshya, Vanijyam, Vaishya Karma, Swabhavajam, says Bhagavad Gita. Krushi is what? Krushi is agriculture. Gaurakshya is cattle farming. And again, Vanijyam, all types of trade. All types of trade. So many traders are there. All those people, they were all wearing this thread. They were wearing genu, and then most of us, even today, we find several castes wearing this genu. And so, if we take this definition of who is a Dvija, in those days, more than 80% of the people were covered by this definition of Dvijati. And then they were all eligible for the study of the Vedas. And about 20% of the people, probably, they were the people who were belonging to servant class. Of course, on the percentage, we may differ, but then Vaishya comprised of a whole variety of castes which were there in the society. And another point is, here I will stop and then I will go into the text. I have spent about more than 5 minutes on this. So, as Srinivas was pointing out, Purusha Sukta is an example. Vedic studies, of course, Purusha Sukta is there in the Rig Veda, in the 10th mandala of the Rig Veda, and it is there in other Vedas also. And if we take this, the Rigvedic version, I will now share the text because I have to read the Sanskrit. Yeah, here it is. It is Sahasra Shirsha Purusha, Sahasraksha Sahasrapad. What does it mean? It has to be slightly explained. Kindly bear with me. It does not talk about creation. It is not a hymn about creation. It is something about a meditation. A person who is trying to meditate on the whole universe as one organic entity. And Sahasra Shirsham is all the 1,000 heads. What are them? It does not mean 1,000 only. Sahasra means infinity. That means the Purusha or the cosmic person who is described in this particular sukta is the aggregate of all the living beings, not only the human beings, all living beings. That means Sahasra Shirsham is head, the head of a mosquito, the head of a lion, the head of a snake. All these heads, they do have some intelligence. All the intelligence which is there in the Antahkarana of all the beings is shown here. That Sahasra Shirsha Purusha is referring to the Hiranyagarbha, who is the cosmic subtle body. And from that cosmic subtle body, the cosmic gross body, what is called Virat, emerges. So Hiranyagarbha and Virat, the cosmic subtle body and the cosmic gross body, they do emerge out of that. And they don't emerge, they are visualized like that. I'm sorry, they don't emerge, they are visualized like that. So it is actually a sort of upasana. And upasana is what a meditation on the oneness of all beings. So that is what it is. And in the middle of the mantras also, we find the words like Katidhavya Kalpayan Yat Purusham Yadadhu Katidhavya Kalpayan Vyakalpa. How did they visualize? Kalpana. Every time it says Kalpana. Something later also we see. Then Mukham Kimasya Kaubahu, what was the face, what was the mouth, what were the shoulders, and then what were the thighs, and what were the feet, etc. Now comes the most controversial line. This line, Brahmanosya Mukhamasit Bahu Rajanya Kutah. If we see the sentence, Brahmana was, Asit in Sanskrit means was, Brahmana was the head. Or mouth. In Sanskrit, Mukham has two meanings, that is both head and also refers to mouth. Quite often it is referred to mouth. He was like a mouthpiece. Bahu Rajanya Krutaha. Bahu Rajanya, that king, was made. Krutaha. Krutaha means he was made, the shoulders. And Uru Tadasya Yadvaishya. Vaishya. Srinivas was referring to one word called Visha. Visha is the plural of wit. Wit is a singular. Wit is any citizen. Visha is the plural of it. Uru is the Dvivachana, that is Uru, the two thighs, were the Vaishya. And Padhyam Shudra Jayaka. Here there is a complication. Here Padhyam is Panchami Vibhakti for those who know Sanskrit. But Padhyam is from that, it means one. And commentators have also said it should not be read from that. It has to be read like in the other first three lines. In the first three lines, it has not said from mouth, from shoulders. It has not said like that. He became that, he was made that, like that. So the last line also, it has to be read accordingly. So that is what it says. So here the Sayana Bhashya, which says that it is a upasana. It says Sarva Prani Samashti Rupaha Brahmanda Deho Viradakyo Yah Purusha. The Sarva Prani Samashti, he is the aggregate of all the beings, not only human beings. Then again, in the last line of this Purusha Sukta, this Rigveda last line, Teha Nakam Mahimanas Sajante Yatra Purve Sadhyas Santi Deva. So the Sayana's commentary is very significant. It shows how it is a upasana. The word upasana is mentioned three times in this line. Atha upasana tat phalanuvada karma phalanuvadaka bhagartha sangruhyate. Upasana. Now we are trying to explain how it is an upasana, he says. Then yatra yasmin virat prapti rupe nake, then virat upasti sadhakaha. That means the people who are doing upasana of this Virat Purusha, they attain the world of upasya devata. That is, they attain the world of Virat Purusha. What does it mean? It is actually attaining the world means being in that state of mind. Loka does not mean a particular physically a three-dimensional place which is hanging somewhere in the on somewhere in the space. Loka means a particular frame of mind. Lokyate anubhuyate iti lokaha. That is the commentary for the word loka. Lokyate anubhuyate. He is in that experiential state where he realizes everybody as part of that one single entity, and that is actually it is a upasana for achieving what is called sarvatma bhava. So here he says, Virat Prapti Rupam Swargam Te Mahimanaha Tad Upasakaha Mahatmanaha Sachante Prapnuvanti. So that's what he writes. And this is supported by all other texts, all other later texts like Bharatam or Bhagavatam, in Mahabharata, Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, in Skandha 2, chapter 1, verse, it says, Brahma Ananam, Kshatra Bhujo Mahatma, then Viduru Ranghishrita Krishna Varnaha. What exactly is there? What was in the same tense and also in the same vibhakti? It is describing. Then here again it says, Yasya Yaha Avayavair Lokan Kalpayanti Manishana. Here again you see the word Kalpayanti. Kalpayanti means what? Visualizing. How did they visualize? The great people, this is the translation by Prabhupada. Great philosophers imagine. That means visualize that the complete planetary systems and the universe are displays of the different upper and lower limbs. Then again, this is again another line, Purushasya Mukham Brahma, Shatram Etasya Bahavaha. That is Mukham Brahma, etc. The same structure is mentioned here. Then again, another shloka, in the very next shloka tells, Bhurloka Kalpita Padhyam. This underlining, that red underlining is highlighting is by me. That is Bhurloka Kalpita Padhyam. Bhurloka visualized as though it has come from the feet. So Bhuvarlokosya Nahitaha, just as the human beings, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaisya, Shudra, is visualized as different parts of the body. Bhuloka is visualized as the feet. Bhuvarloka as the Navi. And then again, Hrudaha Swarloka, the heart portion is Swarloka. And Maharloka is above. So like that, the upper and lower regions, or rather the worlds which we talk about in Puranas, they were all visualized. So this is very repeatedly we see the words like Kalpayanti, Kalpayanti, Kalpitaha, etc. It shows the visualization for meditation on the whole cosmos as one organic entity. Now we come to Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which Mr. Srinivas also mentioned. That of course, Srimad Bhagavatam, we also see how Rishabhadeva's sons, some people they become Brahmins and some people become Kshatriyas. And in Mahabharata, we see that one brother becomes a Brahmana and another brother Shantanu becomes a Kshatriya. Then Vishwamitra Kshatriya becomes a Brahmana. There are innumerable examples. Then in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, if we see that first chapter and fourth Brahmanam and 11th mantra, 1-4-11, it says, Brahmava idamagrasit ekameva tad ekam sannavyabhavat. So Brahma, in the beginning, there was only one, that is all Brahmana. There was no differentiation. Of course, Buddhist version seems to be different. However it is, this is one visualization by one rishi. Brahmava idamagra asit. It was the only Brahmana was the only Varna. And that Varna did not flourish, did not make an effective society. Tad ekam san na vyabhavat. There was no Vaibhava. Now Vyabhavat is there was no Vaibhava. There was no glory. It did not excel. So tat shreyo rupam atyasrujata kshatram. Tat shreyo rupam atyasrujata kshatram. That created another shreyo rupam, a very more powerful rupam called kshatram. Kshatram is something that becomes more powerful. So that is why he says, Tasmat Kshatrat Param Nasti, Tasmat Brahmana Kshatriyam Adhastad Upaste Rajasuye. It says, Kshatrat Param Nasti means there is nothing beyond Kshatriya. Kshatriya is above everybody. Because all the gods also, for example, the gods like Indra, etc., Indra, Varuna, Soma, Parjanya, etc., they are all the Kshatriyas among the Devatas. So it's again a visualization. It is not as though there is one person sitting there. So that is why it says, Tasmat Kshatrat Param Nasti. Kshatriya is supreme. And Tasmat Brahmana Kshatriyam Adhastad Upaste. That is the reason why Brahmana stands on the ground and then he respects the king who is sitting on the throne. Adhastad Upaste Rajasuya, particularly in Rajasuya. Then again it goes like that. Then again, even these two categories did not make the society full. So Sanaiva Vyabhavat, Sa Vishamasrujata, Yan Yetani Deva Jatani, etc. Again, among the gods who are all the Vaishyas, it says, that's a different thing. Even that two categories did not suffice, so they created another category called Visha. Visha is the plural of Vit, that is Vaishya. Then again, even that was not enough. Sanaiva Vyabhava, even that did not excel because we need workers. Sa Shaudram Varnamasrujata, Pushanam Iyam Vai, Pusheyam Hida, Sarvam Pushyati, Adidam Kincha. They created another category called Shudra. He is also called Pusha. Pusha means Pusha Yam Hidam Sarvam. Pusha means one who nourishes. Poshayati, iti Pusha, Poshana. We say Poshana, we know. That is one who nourishes. So then again, we see one interesting thing. The Sankhya doctrine of Kapila has been adopted by sage Vyasa. And we don't see that in the initial portions of the Vedas, we don't find the Sankhya doctrine. Sankhya doctrine has been adopted in the later period. And then probably Sage Vyasa. Sage Vyasa was among the first revolutionaries, we can say. Revolutionaries are a great reformist, we can say. We can tell so many things about Sage Vyasa's reformative steps, including things like Ahimsa, etc. But here, what he did was, he adopted this system of gunas. And then he said, Brahmana is one person who has these gunas. And if you don't have these gunas, you are no longer a Brahmana. So then we come to what we see in the Bhagavad Gita, the very famous sloka, Chaturvarnyam Maya Sistam Gunakarma Vibhagashaha. Then again, the commentary is very, very clear that it is not birth-based, it is something which is based on the guna. Based on the guna, karma has been allotted. Karma means the duty. Based on his character, it is somewhat like an aptitude test. Based on your aptitude and ability, you are allotted. The job profile is given. Then again, in the 18th chapter, we find another line, the 18-41. Brahmana Kshatriya Visham Sudrananja Parantapa Karmani Pravibhaktani Swabhava Prabhavair Gunaihi. Again, Swabhava Prabhavaihi Gunaihi. Swabhava. That is an innate nature, the nature with which he is born. Swabhava Prabhavaihi Gunaihi. What is the mix of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamo Guna in a person? Because these qualities, it is not as though Brahman is 100% Sattva Guna and Shudra is 100% Tamoguna, etc. In Shudra, there is Sattva-guna, Rajoguna, Tamoguna, probably less of Sattva-guna. And in Brahmana, there may be less of Tamoguna. I don't mean to say that all Brahmins, they do have a lot of Sattva-guna. A person who has a lot of Sattva-guna has to be called a Brahmana. That is what repeatedly the sage Vyasa says. So the commentator Nilakantha, one of the important, Nilakantha is one person who has commented on the entire Bharata. We know that Shankaracharya has commented on only a few portions of the Mahabharata, that is Sanat Sujatiyam, then again Vishnu Sahasranama, and also Bhagavad Gita. Whereas this gentleman, Nilakantha, has commented on the entire Bhagavad Gita, Bharatam. So he gives the whole context. So he says, Yasmin kasmin chid varne, tasmad yasmin kasmin chid varne shamadayo dushyante. In whatever varna you find these qualities like Shama, Dama, Titiksha, Ahimsa, and all these qualities. Sa Shudropi etaihi lakshanaihi brahmana eva jnatavyaha. Even if he is born in a Shudra Jati, he has to be treated as a Brahmana. And yatracha brahmanepi Shudra dharmaha drishyante. And in the case of a person who is born in a Brahmin varna, Shudra dharma drishyante. If these Shudra characteristics are seen, he has to be treated, he is a Shudra only, sa Shudra eva. Tatha cha aranyake sarvabhutam nahusham prati. So, of course, I am not going to elaborate on what is this Nahusha Prashna and all that. You may just kindly see what are the lines in that Nahusha Prashna. Nahusha is a great king who was temporarily made a king, Indra, and then he became very vainglorious, and then he became very arrogant, and then he was again kicked out, and he came down and fell on earth as a huge python, and he happened to grab Bhima at some point of time, and Dharmaraja had to go and he had to free Bhima. And in order to get Bhima freed, he had to answer the questions of that Nahusha. So that Nahusha, again, there is an interesting discussion on who is a Brahmana. It again tells how the purity of a Brahmana was in question even at that time. So this Manusmriti, again, if we come to Manusmriti, Kaman Mata Pita Chainam Yadutpadayate Mithaha, the man and woman, out of sheer bodily, physical, say, need, they do meet and then they produce a baby. And Acharyasvasyayam Jatim Vidhivadvedaparaga Utpadayati Savitriya. Then probably there was a system. The commentators, they say that there was some system. We do not know. The Acharya, he used to examine the boy. Maybe when he was 7, 8 or something like that, because at the age of 8, a Brahmin boy was supposed to go to a Gurukula and then spend his time there for about 18 years or so. 18 or 12, we don't know, depending on at that time what was the period. So for that time, at that time the teacher had to a guru, a competent acharya, Veda Paragaha, a person who was an expert in the Vedas. He had to test the boy, and then he had to put him in whatever jati. Here in the word used, jati is used to refer to varna. So this we have to note. Acharyastvasya yam jatim vidhivad Veda Paragaha. Utpadayati Savitriya. Savitri is the same as Gayatri mantra. Sa Satya, Sa Ajara, Amara. So the Jati, which an Acharya who is well versed in Vedas and also following the injunctions of the Vedas brings about for him, that is the Jati which is real and eternal for him. So that is what he says. So here the word Jati is used synonymous with Varna. Then again, Mahabharata, I'll skip this portion. Who is a real Brahmin, etc. There are Satyam, Jnanam, Shama, Sheelam, Anushamsam, Tapo, Damo, Gruna, all these characters, wherever they are. In fact, Srinivas was referring to this Brahmana Varga in Buddha. Buddha, we know this Dharmapadam, if we see, the last chapter is Brahmana Varga. Who is a good Brahmana? Who is the correct Brahmana? So the same shlokas, almost the same shlokas are found in Mahabharata. And we can't say who copied from whom. We need not go into that. But here, an interesting thing is, in this Sarpa, that anaconda, that python, that is King Nahusha, he says, Yadite Vruttato Rajan Brahmana Prasamikshitaha Vyartha Jatistaya Tada Ayushman Krutiriyavan Drusyate. As long as a good conduct is not there, mere Jati, Vyartha Jati Tada Ayushman, hey Ayushman, oh my dear, you Ayushman is addressing him, oh you long live, so something like that. Krutihi yavanna drusyate. Yavat paryan, that is, as long as there is no good character in him, Jati is vyartha. Jati is of no use. And Yudhishthira says, yes, it is right. Jati ratra mahasarpa manushyatve mahamate sankaras sarva varnanam dushparikshiyati me matihi. Jati, that is here referring to the varna, whether the person who is born to a Brahmin father is really a Brahmana, it is something which cannot be determined. Of course, he has not refuted the point that a person who is really born to a Brahmana will have Brahmin characteristics. He has not refuted that. He is referring to Varna Sankara. So it is possible that Varna Sankara might have taken place. So a person who is treated as the son of a Brahmana may not be a Brahmana. So he says, Jati is something which cannot be decided. Sankarat Sarva Varnana. All the Varnas, they have so intermingled that it is very difficult. Dushparikshiyati meva. Dushparikshya is something which is difficult to examine. You can't pariksha. Pariksha is examining. Then again he says Satyam Danam Damastapo Yoga. All these characters Sadhakani Sada Pumsam Na Jatir Na Kulam Rupa. Then again he says the serpent says these are the qualities which have to be which decide the varna. Na jatihi na kulam rupa. Here there are three words we come across. You see, varna, jati, and kulam. Varna, he is saying jatihi sadhakani sadapumsam na jatihi na kulam rupa. Jati and kulam are not going to describe the varna. It is the character which is going to define the varna, he says. So he is using the words jati and kulam. And jati is quite often used as a sort of synonym for varna. So that is what we also see. And kulam is something which is almost like jati. Kulam are various family groups. For example, in the same Kshatriya varna, there can be various kulams also. Then we see, again, this is another line. Brahmana Kshatriyo Vaishya Trayo Varna Dvijataya. So this is again from Manusmriti, 10th chapter 10 and shloka number 4. Brahmana Kshatriyo Vaishya. Manu says there are only four jatis. Four jati. Vaishya Trayo Varna Dvijataya. Chaturtha Eka Jatistu. The fourth jati is Shudra. Nastitu Panchamaha. There is no such thing as fifth one, he says. That is, he is Manusmriti is specific, is clearly identifying jati as varna. Brahmana, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Trayo Varna, Dvijataya. Dvijati only means three. That three jatis are only the Brahmana, Kshatriya, and Vaishya. Chaturtha Eka Jati. The fourth one is that is Shudra. The fourth Jati is Shudra. There is no such thing as Panchama. But there are certain lines here and there that there is one Panchama Jati is also there. And in fact, Srinivas was sharing one note. In that there is a Panchama Jati which is called Nishada. And that Nishada also, if we see, Nishada was eligible for Yajna. Nishada Stapatim Yajayet. That particular line we find in Srimad Ramayana, where that tribal person, Guha comes, and then when Rama was exiled and when Rama and Lakshmana and Sita, they were sitting under a tree, this Guha, an old friend of Rama, comes and then he goes to him and he himself embraces Rama. So the commentators are wondering, how can a tribal go and hug Rama? Then the commentators, they come to the rescue. They again say, yes, tribal chief, he was a tribal, and then he is also entitled for yajna. And this tribal army was also there, part of the royal army. It was there were 6 divisions in the royal army, and one division was the tribal division. So that is what we find in the Ramayana. Then again, Manusmriti also says, Kshatriya Jataya, it uses the word Tapo Bija Prabhavaistu Te Gachanti Yuge Yuge Utkarshancha Apakarshancha. So because of this tapas, by virtue of tapas and by the power of the seed is that bija. Bija is the father. The bija is from the father. That was what was the theme, the idea earlier. The bija and kshetra. If we see the old text, there is a big debate about bijapati and kshetrapati. Who is the kshetrapati? Means the actual husband. Bijapati is a person who actually impregnates. So Bijapati, Tapo Bija Prabhava, by virtue of tapas and by virtue of Bija, somebody from a lower jati can go to an upper jati. So Shanakaistu Kriyalopat Ima Kshatriya Jataya. Yeah, here again we get an important point. Kriyalopat, by giving up various practices, by giving up all these rituals and then by giving up what is their assigned dharma, many Kshatriya Jataya Vrushalatvam Gata Loke Brahmana Darshanena Sha. So Vrushalatvam Gata means they became Shudras by discontinuing the Vedic regimen. That is the Kriya Lopa. Their expected dharma they were not performing, and that is how they became Shudras. So of course this, as I was saying, many people were created as Brahmanas by people like Rama and Parashurama, and many people also, they gave up after right from the 10th century onwards. We know that particularly I request you, those who have not seen that book called Valley of Kashmir, it gives a very horrifying picture of what happened in that place. Of course, very recently also we saw in Kashmir. So anyway, again Sri Rudram, yeah, this again a very important thing is Sri Rudram. Sri Rudram is again
Ravindra
a
garu,
thing.
it is so unpleasant on my part to come in the way of such a beautiful, excellent discussion.
Yeah, is
Very,
it
very
time?
useful, very, very necessary discussion.
Yeah,
But
if I cross my time, I will stop in a couple of minutes. I'll
yeah,
stop
yeah,
in a couple
please,
of minutes. Huh? If
yeah,
exceeded
hope,
time,
yeah, yeah. No,
yeah,
no, no.
I wanted to complete.
Please take a
I
few,
wanted,
1 or 2 more
to
minutes.
complete it at 10:55. It's already 11, 8, 10. Yeah, I'll complete in 2, 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So Sri Rudram again mentions various castes. Various castes means at that time, whatever the caste means, whatever kulams. No, let us not use the word caste. Various kulams, various occupational groups which were available in that, which were present in that society. And again, Chandogya Upanishad, to my knowledge, it uses the word Chandala. Chandala is not there in the Vedic literature, the early Vedic literature. It is there in the later Vedic literature like Brahmana and Upanishad portion. Chandogya Upanishad say uses the word Chandala. Then again, there are certain things which Srinivas also explained. There are many things of Manusmriti which we don't even know, which we don't even follow. Then again, there are other passages in Mahabharata like Bhrugu Bharadwaja Samvada in Shanti Parva that also I request you to read. Bhrugu Bharadwaja Samvada. So in that discussion between Bhrugu and Bharadwaja, there is a mention of how these castes are not castes, the Jatis. These people they degraded and then they fell from one varna to another varna. So something like that. Then the people who were interested in kama, bhoga, priya, hatikshna, so such people among the Brahmins, they became kshatriyas. Some other people who were doing trade, they became vaishyas. So something like that. It tells like that. This is the chapter number 181 of the critical edition of Mahabharata. Then again, 182, we have similar passages. So, Chaturvarnya Bharata Samiksha, these books also for those who know Sanskrit, I request you to read these two, Chaturvarnya Bharata Samiksha and Brahmanotpatti Martanda. Then, yeah, this is my summary. Yeah, these are the one more point is there were no demeaning duties like scavenging, etc. Nowhere mentioned in our books. Probably they were product of invasions. And many Dvijas became Shudras and discarded the sacred threads. And in the action suggested, I said, the traditional religious heads, they have to clarify that caste is not a creation of religion. This is very much needed. It is not as though we just keep quiet about it. Keeping quiet would only harm us. So there is no hierarchy among various columns. They were all independent verticals which evolved as per the needs of the society. So there are certain things which we have to clarify. So with this, I think I will close. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Actually, we are so much indebted to you, Dr. Ravindra Garu. This is such an important information in textual studies. Uh, People need, actually, this paper has to be published and people need to read so much of this other view about textual ideas about Varna. Uh, there are a few comments, not many questions, I think. Let us take up those 1 or 2 questions afterwards.